Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. Thank you guys so much for hopping in with us. It is our Manely Broncos draft recap. We are going to be talking about the Denver Broncos draft that was over the weekend, and then we're going to talk about the undrafted free agents and will the very popular team that is the Denver Broncos, where they find a gem, a diamond in the rough, undrafted free agent. Will it continue with some of the crop of undrafted free agents? We're going to talk about that. And also, we're going to, once we finish up the discussion about the NFL draft on the Broncos scale, we're going to talk about it from also the NFL scale. Who did we feel was some of the bigger winners of this NFL draft? And then to end it all out, we're going to end on a very positive note, which was we can finally put to bed that Jerry Jeudy and his fifth-year option, they finally made a decision on it, and it has been picked up. So thank you guys so much for hopping in with us on the live stream. Also, just a friendly reminder to anyone to read the banner below that if you guys are watching on Twitter, we tweeted it out on my handle, but just a friendly reminder that if you are watching on Twitter, unfortunately, those comments will not be shared on this stream. So you will have to hop on to YouTube or even Facebook if you feel that is necessary. So thank you guys so much again for hopping on with us. And there's no Maddie tonight. There is no Maddie tonight. It's going to be the dynamic duo of both Brandon and I, but that's okay. We got you guys covered. So Brandon, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. This was a interesting draft, to say the least, just like in general. I know going into this, and it's kind of been a fairly common belief, is that this has like been a very unknown draft or difficult draft to predict, like what's going to happen. And I also felt that way because I really wasn't following a ton before the draft, to be honest. I kind of just like snuck up on me because obviously we didn't really have a super high pick. So I just kind of was like, oh, it's the draft, but we don't pick until the third round. So normally I'm super hyped about it. Wasn't as hyped this time, but you know what? I'm pretty happy with what happened. So I'm doing pretty well. Although now we're entering that stretch of what do you do until September?
Yeah.
So yeah,
the
pain of no football.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones where you're just like scratching and clawing at this idea of trying to find something to talk about. Like that's kind of like, that's just sometimes the sad reality. But there will always be something to talk about right here on Manely Broncos. Yeah,
it's like you're on a diet. You walk past your favorite donut shop and you just like look in the window and breathe in the scent, and then just like you have to keep walking because you can't stop and actually get
right. Yeah, right, exactly. So it definitely was a fascinating one. We touched a little bit on it with Broncos Avenue on the 5280 podcast. If you guys want to go back and listen to that, go to the MHRT Network YouTube channel and go click the episode that was the 5280 podcast where we did the interview with Broncos Avenue yesterday. But we talked a little bit about it, Brandon, in the sense of like it felt like this was a nice little blend of maybe what Sean Payton wanted to do and also what George Payton wanted to do. So it's a nice little blend of both. And when you think of the Broncos draft in general, like for as much maneuvering as they did, Brandon, for them to still manage to get 5 picks and still 5 picks and only those 5 picks was honestly insane. Like the fact that's all that transpired was that they still ended up with those 5 picks.
Yeah, a lot of the analysis of the draft, and I'm one of those guys. I mean, like, okay, it's fun to grade a draft right after it happens. I was hesitant to say that word, but good evening, Ray. It's fun to do that, and I'm not going to lie, I enjoy it. It's entertainment. It's fun to talk about. It's something to talk about, and it's just it bridges that gap of like I have to do something about like my team, and I have to talk about the NFL, I have to talk about football because I miss it so much and I need it in my life right now. But I'm not going to also sit here and say like that it's even remotely close to accurate, right? Like none of these people have taken a single snap in the NFL. None of them have even gotten to the facility yet. They've literally done absolutely nothing. They're complete unknowns. Even Bryce Young is an unknown in the NFL, right? He's first overall pick, and obviously he's highly regarded, whatever. But saying that, it is interesting to see how much things weigh into people's like people that analyze our draft class specifically. It's interesting to see the things that go into that and how much they go into it. And what I mean by that is like I've seen people that literally don't even care about the picks that we made have just said, oh, this was a bad draft because we only had 5 picks, but we also gave away picks because we traded up. I'm like, that's stupid. That's not an analysis. We saw a guy we liked and we traded up and got him. That's being a good GM. I mean, you can also sit there and let the guys fall to you, which I think we also did. But if you want someone and you're in a position to make a move and go get them, you do it. And then like we were trading into basically the 3rd round and below. Like it's not like we were giving up valuable picks. But it's just funny that I saw so many people like,
and we'll talk about
hit the Broncos for, they traded their picks, whatever. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly talk about one of those particular picks because it involved a team that they've dealt with before. But like, that's, I think, another reason too, is like if they give it a bad draft, it's like, well, they also say, well, they only had 5 picks because they traded for Russell Wilson and they traded for Sean Payton. It's just like, so, I mean, like that's already happened. Like it is what it is at this point. It's just a matter of what can the Broncos do with this particular draft. And unfortunately, they just have those blinders on that's exactly what they go about it, which is, they have 5 picks. And it's just like, you just got to see what they can do with it. And for the most part, we'll get into it. They did it quite well. And they played the board significantly perfect, I would say. So,
I mean, even if they took a player with one of those picks that we traded away for one of those deals, one, that player is still a complete unknown. Could be a total flop. 2, like you have no idea who they would have picked. And like, it's just, you gave up something you know nothing about for something that you think you at least know a little bit about in Russell Wilson. And in this case of Sean Payton, you're giving up a complete unknown that people put too much value on, by the way. And for a guy that is a proven head coach, especially considering how much you've struggled to fill that role on your team that's so crucial.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's just funny.
Yeah. So, Brandon, should we kick it off? Do you want to go backwards? So I know a lot of people that I know a lot of people that start with the very first pick and go down. Would you want to do something the opposite and start from the back and work, to the first pick, if you will?
Alex Forsyth, come on down.
That's right. So in the 7th round, we're going to work backwards, gentlemen. So, and ladies, if you guys are watching. So we're going to work backwards. And I hope you guys can stick with us. So at like literally as the Broncos were getting ready to finish their draft, they went out and took Alex Forsyth, the center from Oregon. And Brandon, here's this like rare case where and George Payton has said this before, where you typically want to throw darts, should I say, with guys that are like, in the 6th and the 7th round, and and basically just basically shoot for the stars. So you kind of use that phrase a little bit on some of those players, but it's also pretty rare where you have a center, which also happens to be a need, and also has a tendency to fit within that dart territory, and thus enters Alex Forsyth, who also falls into the category of, well, it's actually a little bit of a shock that he was there. So they went out and got Forsyth with the number 270 257th overall pick that they actually acquired in a trade with the New Orleans Saints to trade for Adam Trotman. So the Broncos did address the tight end position with this. So aside from the selection of Alex Forsyth, they also did get Adam Trotman to reunite with Sean Payton within this. So, but your quick analysis before, I'll do mine, but you go first. What was your analysis of, let's just say Trotman and Forsyth?
So first of all, I actually didn't even know about the Trotman trade until like way after it had happened, because I was kind of like at the time when the basically third and final kind of part of the draft was winding down, I was like not really paying attention, if I'm being totally honest. Like I remember talking to myself, not talking to myself about this, but like as I was like going through this process and I was thinking like, oh, I wonder who we picked for their last picks. I literally was like, the thought that went across my mind was, I'm interested to look at who we drafted, because it's probably going to be people I've literally never heard of, because we're in that part of the draft where you'd have those dart throws, you have those guys that like come from a small school, or there's a reason that there's not a lot of spotlight shine on them, because they're not those top 100 guys. There's only so many names out there that you can know about and hear about and understand, right? So I was like going into it like, oh, I really have no intention to pay attention to what's going on, because they're going to be people that I know absolutely nothing about. And literally both of them were people that I actually knew about, which was kind of interesting and funny to me. But I did not know about Adam Troutman until kind of after the fact. I really did not pay attention to the Saints offense and how they utilized him, to be honest with you, because most of my attention was on that offense was taken up by another tight end who shall not be named, who also might play quarterback. But I did go back and kind of do a bit of research. And first of all, Adam Troutman is a guy, just like off the top of my head, when I think of Adam Troutman, even if I haven't watched him much, I'm just like, this guy's been in here for a while. Like, it's a name I've heard a lot of times. This guy is, a vet. He's been in the system. He's older. He's 26 years old. This guy's younger than me. First of all, that's kind of insane.
You're old.
Because I know I'm old. You're older than me. Shut up. But it was interesting to me, because I thought that he was more of like late round draft swap. He's like some kind of veteran, like 30-year-old guy who's kind of on the decline and is not, insanely athletic anymore, or really doesn't have a ton of value. And nothing against Adam Troutman. I'm just like, I was thinking this is a guy who's been around. He's like in the late stages of his career. And it was interesting to know that is definitely not actually the case. But really my first thought about this when I'm looking into the pick is, give Sean Payton guys he knows and guys that he trusts, right? That's really going to be pivotal, especially in his first season as our head coach. Is he's not going into this with complete unknowns. I mean, obviously he knows Russell Wilson. He knows Jerry Jeudy. He knows the big players, and he knows everyone on this roster. But there's a difference between, hey, I've seen that guy on film, to I've literally met that guy, I've coached that guy. That guy knows what I do. So I'm all for it.
And if you're talking about, say, the Adam Troutman stuff, I mean, like that actually is, a big deal, because like, again, like, we kind of did a little bit of a breakdown as far as the wide receiver room and even the tight end room. And it's something that we've said time and time again, and that is unproven, unproven, but talented. And that is the exact same description, I would say, for the tight end room. It's unproven, but talented. And, you do have a talented, room with Greg Dulcich, and you do have talent with Albert Okwuegbunam. Obviously, his situation is still a little bit in flux. And he was actually a guy that I thought, okay, if they're going to make a trade coming back into the 7th round, or make another pick, should I say, like if they wanted to, have 3 picks on day 3 instead of, the 2 that they had or whatever, that they would trade Albert Okwuegbunam and come back into like the 6th round, 7th round, whatever, and then make their pick from there. Well, no. But the thing is like the benefit of Trotman is like it allows those guys like Dulcich and Okwuegbunam the opportunity to get comfortable in the system, understand, the types of roles and responsibilities, and even the the hand placements of, when you're blocking, like, this is exactly how you're supposed to operate in a Sean Payton offense. So, it to your point, it's that comfortability, and then you go to Marquez Callaway. That's a fun little segue in that wide receiver room. Like, so there's a lot of talent within that wide receiver room, but Callaway's been there. He's been in that New Orleans Saints offense. He's been pretty successful when you think back to 2020, within that Sean Payton offense. And so putting him in that Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick when he's now that he's finally healthy, KJ Hamler, Montre Washington, and we'll get to the newest addition here in a little bit. But like, that's such an important piece. And so when you are definitely talking about building a roster, these say a Troutman may not necessarily make the roster, but he's certainly a guy, or I should say, may or may not make the roster, but he's certainly a guy that is going to make his imprint known of, what needs to be done in a Sean Payton offense for years to come for them. So
I feel pretty comfortable that he's going to make the roster. You don't trade for a guy and then just
that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that, like,
I get what you're saying though.
Yeah. But as far as Forsythe goes, he's a guy that, like, we said, like, he fits a need, but it's also within that 7th round. That's like, you're also throwing a dart. So to kind of see this transpire the way it did reminded me a little bit of, now granted, he really didn't pan out, but as far as a draft prospect, he reminded me a little bit of like a Tyree Cleveland. How like Tyree Cleveland, the prospect, should not really have been there in that 7th round. But the Broncos went out and took that chance on him. And again, I'm not saying that, Forsythe may or may not work out, but it's just, again, the prospect, like, you just really never really realize that he's going to be there. And then come to find out that a Kansas City Chiefs, former Kansas City Chief, or I should say related to a Kansas City Chief, Jeff Schwartz, makes a comment that Forsythe may actually end up being one of his favorite offensive linemen in the entire draft, and that he's a type of player that can last in the National Football League for 10 plus years.
10 plus years, yeah.
That's really high praise from especially an offensive lineman like that. And so
I've seen people say that Alex Forsythe was their favorite center in this draft, which is interesting to me. But
yeah.
The thing that just sticks out to me with him is this is definitely a situation. I mean, we talked about it being a dart throw and it's the 7th round, and like that's normally what happens. But I think in this case, it's more of a I'm hesitant to say luck because I mean, it's not luck. Like, this is just, he happened to slide to us, right? But that could just be other teams ignoring him, or just other teams having other people higher on their board, and he just kind of slipped through. It's like one of those guys that happens every single year. You hear about, oh, well, there's, these 50 guys aren't making it out of round 1. Well, there's only 32 picks in round 1. So, like, they have to, right? Only 32 of them are going to go in round 1, or in this case, even 31 this year, because there were only 31 picks. And Alex Forsythe, good Lord, is one of those players. I'm not drunk, I promise, yet. Where I've seen people project him as high as, like, giving him a 3rd round grade. I've seen people give him a 5th round grade. We've talked about, established NFL offensive linemen have said this guy's going to be in the league for 10 years. We've seen other draft pundits say, again, he's their favorite center in the draft. So I think this is a very, very high value pick and a very low risk. Like, you literally are risking absolutely nothing for this guy, but he could turn into your starting center. I mean, I love it. I wanted us to take center. I've been very, very, very vocal about that every single episode for weeks. I've wanted a center. I wanted them to sign a center, and they drafted a center. And you know what? I'm happy with it. Yeah. There were some other guys, Jingleheimer Schmidt, that I might have wanted, but there was no possible way he was getting to us. So Alex Forsythe, I am happy for you. He's also played a little bit of right tackle and some guard, so he has some versatility, but he's played primarily center. So I'm excited to see what he does. Do I think he's going to start as a rookie? Probably not, but can he bring some good competition to that room and maybe win at some point? Yeah. The interesting thing to me that I've seen in a lot of the people that I've seen study, or the studies I've read about Forsyth, and just the limited amount of I've seen it of him, is this is another guy who is very solid in the run game. To say nothing of his pass protection, where like I think he's like basically allowed very few. I think it's like maybe 10 sacks total, like in his career, something like really low. But you see all the time people praise him for his run blocking. Run blocking is very, very clearly a massive focus of this team, and they're just going out and getting guys that can do that. The more the better. We're just going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. And then Russell Wilson's going to run the ball. So this is we're showing our true colors, and our true colors are run the ball.
Right.
So, I love it. I love the pick.
We'll have to find the clip and save it for the regular season of Sandra Bullock on The Blind Side when she's on the phone with
run the damn ball.
Yeah. So we'll have to find that clip and use it as a theme for the show. So what do you guys feel, listeners of the Manely Broncos podcast and watchers of the podcast? Let us know what you guys think. Chime in the comments. What do you guys feel about the Alex Forsyth selection to the Denver Broncos? We shared this earlier, and I to be fair, I'm kind of with it a little bit, because there was a staggering statistic that I heard. I'm sure you've seen it too, Brandon. It's like they have not drafted an offensive tackle, since Garrett Bowles, like a developmental tackle or even a tackle since Garrett Bowles, which is such a I don't
think I've seen that.
Yeah, which is kind of
Hold on. I gotta look this up. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unbelievable to me, because tackle especially is a position where it's very hard to develop them, and you want to go after your more vets. Okay, I mean, do those people think Dalton Reisner's a guard then? Because technically he was a tackle when they drafted him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even then, that was 2019.
Yeah. Some final comments on Forsyth that I think, is beneficial is, this obviously had to please Zach Strief, the offensive line coach, because Strief himself was a late round draft pick, and, this is a player that we, could also be a successful center. When you kind of look at some of the history of some developmental centers within this league, it's not just the third round where you find some really good centers, but also you find some pretty successful centers from the 5th round to the 7th round as far as some pretty successful centers. So, there are some decent, centers that have been pretty successful within that in the later rounds. So, moving on and kind of keeping the theme, if you will, Brandon, with the, the high value and taking I should say, like a surprise that maybe he fell there. This is a guy to maybe get it out of the way, to get it out of the way. That is maybe he's your favorite as well, Brandon, but this player right here has to be my favorite pick of the entire draft, at pick 183, because once a Bronco, always a Bronco. And at pick 183, the Denver Broncos selected J.L. Skinner, a big physical safety from the Boise State Broncos. Your initial read, or take on Skinner, to the Broncos, kind of keeping his home Bronco theme going. You're muted, Brandon.
I have to say one thing before I talk about J.L. Skinner. Matt Paradis drafted in the 6th round. That's all I'm saying. All right, J.L. Skinner. I think my exact reaction when this happened was I texted our group chat like, "Holy shit, J.L. Skinner in the 6th round is ridiculous." Yeah. This guy, if you paid attention to a couple of our previous episodes, this is a Frankie's guy. Frankie loves this guy. This is one of the guys that he actually picked the Broncos in our mock that we ran.
Much earlier, mind you.
Much earlier. Yeah, definitely not in the 6th round. I mean, I love this pick. Another pick that just like it's one of those picks of like, I was going into this like, yeah, I'm not even going to pay attention. I probably don't even know who they are. I look at who we picked. I'm like, oh yeah, JL Skinner. Like, holy shit. That's insane because JL Skinner is a very talented safety. And we seem to have a knack for finding safeties in the later rounds in the draft. And that room, I mean, again, there's a lot of unknown there, and especially JL Skinner. He's a rookie. He's a very, very physical guy. He pops people. This guy wants to hit you as hard as he possibly can and knock the ball out of your hands and probably knock you out. Like, this guy is the epitome of a physical safety, and I love it. I love the pick. I think it does nothing but add to that room. It gives us some great versatility. He can maybe do other things too. I mean, obviously you have Justin Simmons back there. And then after Justin Simmons, it's kind of like a little bit of a up for grabs in terms of who's going to be the actual starter across from him. And, you know, again, the more you put in that room, the better. I don't think you can have too many. I mean, again, I love Caden Stearns. I think Caden Stearns is going to be an incredible safety, and I want to see him get as many snaps as he can because I think he's going to be awesome. But JL Skinner, come on down. Welcome to Denver. Still a Bronco. Once a Bronco, always a Bronco. Just stay a Bronco. That secondary as a whole, I love it. Keep the strength to strength. Keep adding to that war chest, that room, that cabinet, whatever you want to call it. Although we were looking a little thin there, especially corner, which we'll talk about because we also took a corner, which we needed. But the more you add to the secondary, you can't have too many good players in the secondary, and JL Skinner is a good player who should not have fallen to the 6th round.
We said it also on the 5280 podcast. This also said without saying it, but by their actions, that the door with Kareem Jackson is, for the most part, closed. Yeah. But you know, there's two thoughts. One is I don't know if you've had the opportunity to watch this as far as a video that has been circling, Brandon, but I am certainly thankful that JL Skinner did not end up with the New England Patriots, because Mark Wahlberg, one of my favorite actors,
I saw that.
Was in like in an Albertsons parking lot, and just out of the clear blue, JL Skinner is in a car, either going into Albertsons or he was just leaving, but he bumped into Wahlberg. And they were just talking about, what, kind of exchanging pleasantries and, and so it's just like exciting to kind of see in the league. And then they end up talking about the New England Patriots and, so that is definitely one where I am very thankful that Skinner did not end up with, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. And then second,
I'm sure Steve Atwater approves of this pick. That's all I'll say.
Yes. And I was going to say too, he really reminds me, and I'll bring it up again, but he reminds me, you never want to go with those high, lofty comparisons. And I'm not necessarily saying it, but Skinner has said it himself. But you really do see a Cam Chancellor type within his game. Like the type of rare size and just the ability to be that kind of physical prowess at safety is pretty rare. And like I really didn't really realize that he's a little above 6'3" and about 6'4". So you put him
6'4", 220. That's insane.
So you put him with the room of Justin Simmons. That's a towering combo with Justin Simmons. And typically when you see something like that, like with Justin, like and that kind of size, they're typically a little bit more athletic. And that's been just the tail of the tape the last few years, like in the NFL and prospect wise, because like Kyle Hamilton, right? Like Kyle Hamilton was roughly that height, but an athletic freak like Justin Simmons, right? Caden Stearns would be kind of like within that category as well. So I mean, like, but when you put it in and you put it pound for pound, he gives you versatility. You could even use him in the box. You could even use him as a roving, in the box safety. I mean, you could even use him in a way like a Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams in a way, like, like a guy that's a safety / linebacker pass rusher almost.
The star position at Alabama, basically.
Right. And so not necessarily a safety, but he definitely is a safety, truly. But
Linebacker, whatever you want to call him.
yeah, so I mean, he's definitely going to be a fascinating one to watch, and without question, he's probably my favorite pick. Except for I will say these next couple are pretty close in line, and that just goes to show you kind of how good this draft was.
Well, and JL Skinner, another guy projected to go in rounds 3 or 4. Got him in 6.
What did you guys feel about the JL Skinner pick? We didn't get any comments, which is a good thing. That means that it sounds like the fans really enjoyed the Alex Forsyth pick. So, what did you guys feel about the JL Skinner selection to the Broncos from the Boise State Broncos? If you guys are commenting on Twitter, your comments will not be shown on the live stream. So sadly, you guys are going to have to go to the MHRT Network YouTube channel. But when you're there, subscribe to the MHRT Network on YouTube. So like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, and on MHRT YouTube, subscribe. So thank you guys so much. Now on the next pick, this was one took a little bit of some maneuvering. This was one where the Broncos made themselves once again a meme with a fellow trade partner, that being the Seattle Seahawks. They traded up with the Seattle Seahawks. They gave a little bit. They gave up a little bit, but it wasn't like overbearing. It wasn't a lot, So, but they went out and they drafted Riley Moss from the University of Iowa. Now, to preface this, he is a really, really good corner as a draft prospect. You very rarely get athletic, speedy, just a freak type athlete. Like his RAS score was almost 10, as far as a RAS score out of Iowa. Like really, and there's another guy in Sayer Bettinger and another friend of the pod, Nick Kendall, can tell you even further, but there's also another corner there who's even good in his own right. So, but Riley Moss, he's a guy that is so versatile, Brandon, that you could play him in a various different ways, whether that be nickel corner, maybe even safety. It certainly seems like the Broncos are a little bit bent on putting it on him being a nickel corner, or even just a corner. Which is nice because, like, when you have a role defined for a young player this early, they have a chance to develop better when you kind of find that niche for him, that early on. So, but Riley Moss headed to the Denver Broncos at the 83rd overall selection from Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, the trade was a little bit much. Like, we gave up a 4th round pick this year and a 3rd round pick next year, which was. They clearly liked him. They clearly like him. They seem to have for these next couple picks, especially, they seem to kind of have a type. They want super athletic, super rangy, super versatile, and Riley Moss definitely fits all of those boxes. He also is a bit older. Older coming into the NFL. He's 23. I think he's the same age. Okay, Jerry Jeudy just turned 24, like literally a week and a half ago. But I was going to say he'd be the same age as Jerry Jeudy, which is kind of funny. But I don't hate the pick. I like that we took a corner. He seems like he's a good corner. This was a good draft class for corners. He seems like a freak athlete and a guy that could potentially develop into a starter. And like, if you're going to take a starter in the secondary in the draft, I really don't care what you give up to go up and get him, because again, a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick. Yeah, you have to trade those away to get him, but those are not super high picks in the future. One of them was this year. The other one is at a future year. You can't get more unknown than a late round pick next year, right? Like, don't overvalue it. If they like the guy, if they think he can provide something to this defense and they think he can make an impact, then I'm okay with taking him. I mean, some people said he was a little bit of a reach. I think this was another one that, like, the draft was kind of, the grades were all over the place a little bit. Like, some people say we took him higher. than they had it projected. Some people had him as like a 5th round pick. One of the kind of fun things I like to do when I'm looking at a draft and I think like, oh, I don't like this pick because we over drafted him. We drafted him too high, is like, I'll look at some of the picks I did like and just swap them. If we took JL Skinner at pick 83 and Riley Moss 100 picks later, I wouldn't bat my eye at it, right? Like I literally wouldn't
That's
even
a really good way to look at it.
And if we had traded up to get JL Skinner, I wouldn't have cared. He's a really good safety. He's one of the best safeties in this class, depending on who you ask. He's maybe the second best safety in this class, depending on who you ask. So again, I think the trade, it was a lot. People overreact to it. He's played a ton of snaps at corner. I think he started like 80 games or something ridiculous. Because didn't he play? Because he's 23. He played multiple, like 5 years, I think. He played a lot. He's played a lot. He has a lot of experience. He's made a lot of plays. He's a good corner. You can't have too many good corners.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, is he's a playmaking corner as well. He had multiple pick sixes. And in fact, I think he had some games where he had multiple pick sixes in a game. So he's a playmaking safety. And when you add that kind of instincts and who he is as a player, who he is as a corner, I would not be surprised if he's one of those guys that's, those early contributors.
I don't know why I said.
Go
ahead.
No, just with this defense, but go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know why I said 80 games. I was just like, got excited, got ahead of myself. He's not 40 years old. He hasn't started games. My point is he started a lot of games in college. I don't have the exact number head in front of me, but basically he started a ton of games. That's my point. Not 80 games. He's not that old.
Yeah. And he's just one of those guys that, you really wonder what it's going to be like within that room. Oh, and by the way, this is also an ode to, a certain coach that the Broncos were able to keep on their staff, by the way, Christian Parker, one of the best defensive backs coach and secondary coaches in the National Football League, maybe a rising star within the in the coaching ranks. So anybody that hasn't, brought this up, but if Christian Parker signs off on the idea to give JL Skinner, to get JL Skinner and Riley Moss, especially, I'm all for it, because you're going to, that it's going to make the life great for that type of player when you put Riley Moss in that type of system. My only hesitation is I just hope that Riley Moss, and I mean this from the NFL career perspective, I hope he doesn't turn out to be like another fellow Hawkeye that was a corner who I really liked and was a great player, and that was Joshua Jackson. Another productive corner at Iowa, playmaking corner, another corner that had a lot of pick sixes. You just hope that he's not like that kind of guy. But again, if you're going to that room with Christian Parker, a rising star within this coaching industry, you give him that plus PS2. And oh, by the way, another third-round draft pick that was a corner from George Payton's draft class, who has done all right in terms of turning, his rookie season into, a nice little boost for himself going into 2023. That's Damari Mathis. So, I mean, I definitely, the cornerback room is better. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they added someone else to the room as well. But
I thought you were starting to say that you hope he doesn't turn out like Michael Ojemudia, and I was like, too soon.
Oh, no, I was going
corner from Iowa.
Yeah.
You went further back.
Yeah, I went a little further back with Joshua Jackson. But now we get into so like these last three, right, kind of would probably fall in the tendency of in that category of maybe some of our favorites. But now we get into Drew Sanders at pick 67 overall, and a lot of mixed bag on this, in the sense of a lot of people felt once again that he was better than Jack Campbell. Like some people felt like he was better than Jack Campbell. Yeah.
That's the best linebacker in the class.
But it's also a case where the Broncos did something that I think a lot of people were huge fans of that are draft experts, and that was they decided to take an off-ball linebacker in the 3rd round, and the Detroit Lions went out and maybe took an off-ball linebacker in the 1st round. Again, Jack Campbell's a great player. It was just interesting that they decided to go after their type within the 1st round for a Jack Campbell who probably was, or at least might have been there in the 2nd round. So it's a little bit interesting that they went out and made that selection, but they go out and get Drew Sanders in the 3rd round, within that selection, a guy that transferred from Alabama, Brandon. He was an edge player at Alabama. We know that he probably wasn't going to be seeing the field much down there, but he transferred and he went over to Arkansas, and he really shined in the time that he had there. In his final season as with the Arkansas Razorbacks, he registered 100 tackles with the Razorbacks and just under 10 sacks in 2022, which is an absurd number. So he's a player that would probably fit the same way that you would have kind of evaluated Baron Browning. And I think that's fair to say. But yeah, Brandon, Drew Sanders to the Denver Broncos.
So when this pick happened, I was like, I honestly didn't even know who this was. I was like, who the hell is that? I have no idea who you are. I had to do a lot of research and look up who is Drew Sanders. And this guy, first of all, seemed to be one of the highest and most rising players in this entire draft class. He kind of just like came out of nowhere. Some people had him as a 1st round grade, which like is insane. Some other analysts were like, hey, I know some people rank him as 1st round. I think that's a bit extreme. But basically, it boils down to we got an amazing athlete here. Again, seem to value something specific in what we're looking for with some of these guys. Hint, hint. Another guy, just like JL Skinner, that wants to hit people. He loves to hit people. This guy is going to knock the ball out of your hand. This guy is going to hunt the quarterback. This guy is athletic enough to drop into coverage as well. So you're looking for that chess piece. You can move around on the line along just the defense, and a guy you can have in that linebacker room as kind of your do-it-all guy, which we seem to trying to be adding a lot of people there that can do that role. I mean, Drew Sanders is one of those guys. If you want to put him on a tight end, you can honestly even do that. He's fast enough to be on a tight end. This guy is a freak athlete. If you want to use him to rush the passer, he can. If you want to use him against the run, you can. He's kind of like Micah Parsons a little bit, which is interesting to hear myself even say that, because I know we said Baron Browning was also kind of like Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
But we seem to be valuing that versatile edge and inside athlete. And I don't know, how many of those guys we're trying to get here. I don't know exactly what we're looking for. Maybe we found him. Honestly, this actually turned into probably my favorite pick. And I say that turned into because, again, when it first happened, I had no idea who he was. But the more I looked into him, I was like, this guy bet on himself. He was at Alabama in a very deep room. He was good, but he knew he was not going to play much. So he bet on himself. He went to Arkansas. He changed positions to off-ball linebacker and just blew up and had an insane year. He had like 13 and a half sacks, I think. Had 103 tackles, which is ridiculous.
For a career, for a career, I think.
Yeah. He is athletic enough to be in coverage, and also he can. There were a couple games, ironically, I think against Alabama. It wasn't against Alabama. I don't remember who it was. Basically, he was starting in coverage, and then the quarterback leaked out and started to run. It might have been
Bryce
Bama.
Young.
Yeah, I think it was Bryce Young. I couldn't remember exactly who it was. I know I saw it happen, which is kind of funny that it was against Bama. Basically, Bryce Young leaked out and was like starting to run and going towards the sidelines. And Drew Sanders was in coverage, like in the middle of the field, watching his eyes, and read the run and like ran up and chased him down and tackled him, which is ridiculous. Chase Young. Well, he's not
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young. He's not Chase Young. Edge player Young. Edge player Young. I'm sorry. Bryce Young. He's not he's not Lamar Jackson, but he can move.
Yeah. I think the thing that I loved about this is, I will say Drew Sanders does have some limitation. I think that's probably why the Broncos maybe view him as an inside linebacker, right? It's kind of what they were saying, that they may view him a little bit as an inside linebacker. But a selection like this means that they are going to be going forward with Baron Browning as probably an edge rusher versus Drew Sanders, who's going to end up being probably playing the role of what we had anticipated Baron Browning to play when Vic Fangio was here. And so this just affords them that opportunity to really have just two toys like that on their defense. And if there's something that Vance Joseph loves on his defense as of least recent, it's those types of athletes. I mean, think of Isaiah Simmons.
The Vance Joseph, Isaiah Simmons guy.
This is the Isaiah Simmons, the Zaven Collins. Like this is that kind of mold a player, that you're probably looking at that Vance Joseph really likes a lot. So you're really kind of looking at it from the standpoint that they really have drafted a pure athlete, I think, at that inside linebacker position with some of that limitations. And I would say that I think initially he's definitely going to be contributing on special teams. But I'm really glad you highlighted the Bryce Young highlight, because
you mean Chase Young? Just kidding.
Yeah, boy, if he chased down
Chase Young, man.
If Chase Young was quarterback, that's even more impressive.
If Chase Young was a quarterback, I'm impressed by that alone. But it was insane.
But to your point, though, like I think that's a niche for him. Say in 2023, that if you're going to try and carve out a role for him, mainly what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're going to face the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, but obviously plays teams like the Chiefs, like especially when you're facing a Patrick Mahomes, that's the kind of guy that you could potentially use as a spy on Patrick Mahomes in certain situations and use him as a rover, or even a J.L. Skinner for that matter, on something like that. But yeah, so
he's also had some picks in the middle of the field too, which is kind of insane.
Yes.
I will say that I'm pretty sure Justin Strnad is probably gone.
Yes, this probably does spell the end for Justin Strnad, unfortunately.
But that linebacker room could be something.
Also, this is probably I will say this is also Josie Jewell insurance, because this is Josie's last year contractually. And so this is Josie Jewell insurance if they end up moving on from Josie. That this is maybe his replacement. By the way, perspective check for anybody. I did tweet it out on draft night, but I don't know if you saw this, Brandon, but just this just puts into perspective just how big Sanders is. Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell are 6'2". Drew Sanders is 6'5".
6'5", yeah. It's insane.
Yeah, so just a perspective check on that one. Now we get to go ahead.
Final thing. He's 6'5", 234, which if you haven't seen him play, this guy is freaky athletic for being 6'5", 234. Like, it's insane. But like what you're saying about Josie Jewell, when we got Josie Jewell's, and I love Josie Jewell. Like, I'm not saying anything against Josie Jewell.
Yeah.
Josie Jewell's whole thing was like, he's very instinctual and smart, but not very athletic. And he's like, was an incredibly consistent tackler. At Iowa, he did play in coverage a little bit. And Drew Sanders is like, take that and crank it up to 12 athletically. I'm not saying he's Josie Jewell, but he kind of did some of the same things that Josie Jewell is doing. Yeah. But he's way more athletic. Yeah.
What's up, Clayton? Thanks for hopping in with us. And Ray, as well. Thank you for hopping in and catching the show with us. And yes, smash that like button, share it, go tell your friends, go have your friends tell their friends about the Manly Broncos podcast. And in particular, this particular show. Now, we get to probably, I think it's fair to say, Brandon, that this is probably Maddie's favorite pick for a lot of reasons. This was a guy that we all liked. Like, we all liked him as a wide receiver. And And he was a player that we thought, maybe they draft a Trey Palmer, maybe they go out and get some of those other wide receivers. But Marvin Mims was always one of those guys who was like always on our radar, right? Like always a little bit on our radar. And they go out and they draft Marvin Mims from the University of Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner. They go out and get Marvin Mims as their first selection of that draft class. So to start from the back, we finally end in the front, and Marvin Mims at pick 63. Pretty popular comparison, by the way, Brandon. I'm sure you've seen it. About him being compared a little bit to Emmanuel Sanders. But
I did see that. Yeah.
But yeah, so Marvin Mims is Maddie's favorite selection for a lot of reasons. But of course, one of them is that he went to Oklahoma. But yeah, Marvin Mims was his favorite pick. But your take with Mims?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this one. I definitely wasn't expecting that we would trade into the last pick of the second round for this. I don't know if you saw Steve Smith kind of did like a little bit of an analysis on him. I think it was after we picked him, like right after we picked him, where he was basically saying that like they underutilized him at Oklahoma.
Which is crazy to say.
Which is kind of insane to think about, yeah. Because he did have like 1,000-yard season. He made some absolutely freaky catches. Though, like a lot of things that I see when I see people talk about Mims is like, oh, he's just like a super fast, quick twitch speed guy, which is true. Like he had was it 4.38? 3.840? Yeah, something ridiculous. I was looking up the official number. 4.38, which is insane. So this guy brings the speed for sure, but it's not like that's all he does. If you watch some of his, even if you just watch the highlights, which again, they don't tell you the whole story. They don't even show you exactly what's happening on the play. But he's had some plays where he literally, I wanted to say he Suttons people, but he Mosses people. Like there was this one game against, I think it was Texas Tech. I can't remember exactly.
I think I know the catch you're going with.
He was like running down the sideline, and he was matched up against the corner, and like it wasn't a great throw, and he was kind of out of position, like he just wasn't open in any way, shape, or form. But he literally like he's here, the defender is in front of him, like there's literally no way he can make this catch like cleanly. Like the defender is in the way, and he reaches his arms, he basically hugs the defender and like catches it in one arm, basically, like behind, and almost like he doesn't even like push it against the defender, but he's like hugging the defender, and he still catches the ball in his hand. And then he like loses it a little bit, and then he's going down to the ground, and he gets it again, and it's like an insanely acrobatic catch. So this guy doesn't just like, he's not just fast, he actually has hands, right? And KJ Hamler, you're on notice. Sorry.
I feel like this is one of those moves that just unfortunately is just one where it probably could put guys like KJ Hamler, Montreal Washington on notice. I do know that Benjamin Albright has mentioned maybe Montreal might actually be changing positions, is kind of what he had been mentioning before. That he may be getting some looks at running back, which I think is interesting. Maybe being like a true gadget player.
I did not see that.
But like, I think that would be interesting. Kind of using him in that role. But I think that's the blessing of having these types of guys is you have so many toys to work with, and you get creative with the Sean Payton when you can use guys like that. So, but Mims, I tell you, I typically am not necessarily one to throw comparisons out very often anymore, Brandon, but I don't know about you. But he reminds me a little bit of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. But he does have shades of Emmanuel Sanders. But I think that he reminds me a little bit of a former wide receiver that Sean Payton's worked with a little bit in Brandon Cooks. But I also think there's another Brandon that he reminds me of, and that is Brandon Lloyd. In and with the
I thought
way
you were
that
gonna say Brandon Marshall. I was like, man, what you smoking?
he just needs to be about,
He
4
got to
or
put
5.
on some steroids for that, man.
Yeah. And he's got to add, about what, 4 or 5,
What's in that syringe?
yeah. You and I are Captain America fans, right? So like he would
He has a
basically
super soldier serum.
yeah, so he'd have to have the super soldier serum, goes into the capsule, comes out, and there's your there's your Brandon Marshall, but he's really Marvin Mims. But
The thing that's interesting to me with Marvin Mims is he was drafted ahead of some guys who
yes,
were kind of put ahead of him, to be honest. With
yeah,
you got guys like Tank Dell, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman. One of the guys that I mean, again, even if we took the thing that annoys me more is like doesn't or not really annoys me, but like again, you go back to doing that game where you kind of just swap some picks around. Knowing what I know now about Drew Sanders, if we took Drew Sanders at that
right,
selection, and then we took Marvin Mims, I mean, again, I wouldn't really care. But there were guys like Tajay Spears available as well, which again, I think it's kind of interesting that we didn't take a running back, and we'll kind of talk about that. But I mean, again, nothing against Marvin Mims. I think he's a good wide receiver. I have nothing against the pick. It's just interesting to me, and I'm not even really comparing him to these other guys because I don't know enough about them as players to really do that. But it is interesting to me that we valued him higher than some of the people that seemed to be projected to go higher than him in like specifically Tank Dell.
right. And for Tank Dell, like it seems like he went into a pretty decent situation for himself going to Houston. But yeah, Marvin Mims, man, I'm really excited for him, and I'm be really curious to see what role he gets carved out with this team on the offensive side of the ball. He adds a special teams element as well, which is something that obviously the Denver Broncos do need. They do need that special teamer that can be that contributor. And yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see, how this certainly unfolds, because they also did add Trey Smith in the offseason, who is should we say, maybe a pure kickoff returner, punt returner. So it's going to be a little bit interesting, what they want to do with Mims within this offense. And do they necessarily view Mims and KJ, a healthy KJ, as your, dynamic weapons with this offense? I think that would be fun, because then you can truly see like the fruits of your labor, if you will, with a KJ Hamler and a Marvin Mims. That would be really interesting, and thus enters the conversation with Montreal Washington.
So the thing that's interesting to me here, and actually, Chad, I'm interested to also like hear what you have to say about this. So when this pick happened, I'm pretty sure myself and literally every other possible member of Broncos country was like, oh, they traded someone.
Yeah.
Like, did you have that feeling? Because I had that feeling.
Well, because that was always the feeling, is like, yeah. So people who are watching the stream, do comment in the chat what you feel when they did take the wide receiver, because that was the theme, Brandon. Like when they took the wide receivers, like, oh man, they really do. They really might trade someone, because like, especially with the stuff with Jerry Jeudy and Courtland, and you know what? Let's just go into it, because like that's the thing that like we were gonna save it for the end, but like since you brought it up, and talking about the wide receiver room, it was really nice to see them put to bed all of that, and maybe that was that they wanted to kind of go through the room and make the certain calls that they did. But it was very clear, where they stood with Jerry Jeudy, and with the trade interest that was garnered from them. It was nice to kind of put to bed all of those rumors, and really put to bed how strong of an interest they are in keeping Jerry Jeudy long term with Sean Payton and this offense going forward. So they decided to pick up that 5th-year option, which, if you kind of saw what they were doing, their actions and their words, this just seemed like a no-brainer as far as them picking up the 5th-year option. It took a bit.
Yeah.
We certainly were sweating. I'm currently sweating just even thinking about it. But man, they finally decided to pick up that 5th-year option.
Well, so here's the weird thing about this. I've said multiple times that, and literally even today, that it seems to me that we are clearly moving in a run first direction. Obviously, we also just traded up and took wide receiver with our first pick in the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a trade that happens. I'm not saying it's Jerry Jeudy. It's probably not Jerry Jeudy because we picked up his contract. It could be
another
Courtland
one.
Sutton.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I hate it. I love Courtland Sutton. But it just is interesting to me because it was already a rumor. We are very clearly making moves to go in the opposite direction in terms of what we're doing with the ball. We're going to run the ball more. And then we go and also pick up another super speedy wide receiver. I mean, are we just going to cut KJ Hamler or like what's going to happen in that room? Because something's probably going to happen. And then there was also a report from Matthew Berry that we were quietly shopping Courtland Sutton. And that was Monday, I think.
Yeah.
He also tweeted, "I just want to be where I'm wanted and appreciated," which I hate to see because Court, I want you and appreciate you and I love you.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
I don't want it to happen. It wouldn't surprise me if it happens. It was interesting to me that those two things seem to be contradictory in the sense of we're trying to go very run heavy and we're adding a lot of weapons.
Yeah. And to to Marvin Mims, that's an underrated aspect of his game is that he's a very willing blocker, not necessarily say like a good blocker or or whatever, but there's a difference between when you want to work with a guy who's unwilling, you're probably not going to work with a guy who's unwilling as a blocker. But
you can't be unwilling as a blocker in the NFL. Right. I'm pretty sure it's illegal.
I mean, we'll certainly have a conversation with Alberto Cueva.
I'm kidding about that. It was a little bit of a slight to some people that I didn't mean personally, but
yeah. But
that was sarcasm if you couldn't tell, because there's definitely some people that phone it in.
Right. But when you are willing, and Marvin Mims is willing, you want to make sure that that's the thing that you can teach. And he's a willing blocker. And that's like the first building blocks of being a decent run blocker. And so, it's a fun thing I think you can certainly work with there. Now to kind of tie a bow on all of that, and we certainly talked a little about the Jerry Jeudy thing. We'll talk a little bit about that certainly more in future episodes. Who did you feel like had a? We'll run through a few teams, but who do you feel like had maybe the best draft? And I think it's probably one you and I share. But who do you feel like had the best draft from the National Football League perspective as a whole?
I mean, I'm pretty positive we're going to have the exact same answer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the Eagles.
Yeah.
It's Philly. The Eagles were thieves. Straight up, the Eagles were thieves. They got Jalen Carter. I mean, Jalen Carter has obvious red flags off the field. Obvious red flags. But he's an insane football player. And honestly, would I have wanted him in Denver? Probably not.
Yeah.
Am I intrigued by him going to the Eagles and that culture? And do I think that culture can probably turn him around and get him to get his shit together? Yeah, I do. I just think they had the best draft by far. I do agree with Clayton. I think also that Detroit had a sneaky good draft, but going back to Eagles for a second, Jalen Carter, obviously insane. Nolan Smith, also a great pick.
Where'd he go?
Georgia. So the draft of Georgia, just hold on for a minute here. Jalen Carter, Georgia. Nolan Smith, Georgia. I didn't know a ton about their Alabama tackle that they took, Tyler Steen.
Yeah.
Sidney Brown, Illinois, fantastic defensive back. Amazing. I can't believe they got him in round 3. That's insane.
Yeah.
Kelly Ringo from Georgia on insanely good corner that probably could have gone in the second round or maybe the first round.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there. Maybe he's injured. I don't know. There's got to be something that we don't know about. But very good corner. Tanner McKee, low-key kind of interesting. They don't need a quarterback at all. He's not going to play at all, but low-key kind of an interesting guy in terms of just a player. Moro Ojomo, don't know a ton about him, except he has an amazing name. This Thieves, Eagles of Thieves.
And oh, by the way, they also acquired a running back.
And I forgot that they traded for DeAndre Swift, which blew my mind when that happened.
Yeah, and so they
holy shit, the Eagles are going to be players.
They got DeAndre Swift, who also went to
Georgia.
So yeah, the Eagles.
We just call them the Georgia Eagles.
Did you see the meme that everybody made, which was they did the Eagles name, but instead of the G, they did the Georgia G.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Eagles. Anyway.
So another
that's
one.
Insane.
Another one that you really do have to give them props, and it took balls. It's certainly balls for them, but it's something I think you can.
He has them.
Yeah. In a dream scenario, but the Houston Texans, man, I mean, they go out and they take CJ Stroud. They don't mess around in taking CJ Stroud. Well, you know what? They had the 12th overall selection. They went out and basically decided to, put their money where their mouth is and grow a pair of big ones and trade back with Arizona, who had been rumored to be trading, back. And so they go to Arizona and draft Will Anderson. And so in back-to-back picks, you take the staples, I would say, of your franchise.
You take your offensive and defensive staples in the first two. D'Amico Ryans is a happy man. I'm happy for you, man.
Yeah. So
the Texans are finally going in some kind of a direction that resembles forward or up or whatever you maybe want to call that. Shout out to my guy, Brett Coleman, who, if you're not familiar with him on YouTube, fantastic content creator. Go watch him. He's a massive Texans fan. And I know he's been in hell for like ever because they've been the Texans, but they suddenly seem to be doing stuff. Like, I'm kind of low key. I know I said the Eagles, like I'm still sticking with the Eagles, but you're right. The Texans had a great draft. Guess who else they also still got that I literally just talked about? Tank Dell. Yeah. Also a good wide receiver that they still got him after they traded back up to pick 3 right after.
You almost wonder if if it was the height concerns. Nothing else, but if you almost wonder if it was the height concerns with Tank.
And then they got Henry To'oTo'o as well, who's kind of like another one of those sneaky linebackers. He kind of fell off the map a little bit. Like, I heard a lot about him, then I didn't hear anything about him from Alabama. They took 2 centers, I think, which was interesting. Xavier Hutchinson, who's kind of a guy.
I had him compared a little bit to Tim Patrick. I mean, yeah. So yeah, they really did quite well. Yes, Detroit did quite well. The Pittsburgh Steelers was another one that I thought had a great draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers. They go out and make the wholesome selection of taking Joey Porter Jr. and actually having him slide to the second round, and then I would say luck on that one, but they go out and take Joey Porter and have him reunite in Pittsburgh. And so they had a great draft. And as much as I was going to say,
about to say what I'm about to say.
I was just going to say, and it pains me to say this because of all the stuff that we've been dealing with them and the trade of Riley Moss and the trade of Russell Wilson and just the history surrounding them and the history of them with, losing a Super Bowl and the trade of Russell Wilson. You have to give props to the Seattle Seahawks for the draft once again that they had, and getting Jackson Smith and Jigba, Derek Hall. They drafted another edge player. They in their very first pick, they get Devin Witherspoon, a complete surprise, and go out and get Witherspoon.
Man, that's a scary secondary.
So now you have Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen. So Seattle really did quite well for themselves.
They got Zach Charbonnet too.
I think that was the one thing I was going to say that's just a tad bit of a surprise is that they
It was
went for a back that early.
They took 2 running backs. They'll start
Yeah.
Kenny McIntosh.
That's right. Yeah, they went out and took Kenny McIntosh, who, by the way, was a Broncos visit. If I'm not. But what's up, Avatar?
Rising Rhino, welcome. I have to also say this is what I thought you were going to say. I don't like saying these words. The Raiders had some decent picks in their first couple picks.
They kind of got
the draft was kind of like yeah. But Tyree Wilson, scary.
Yeah,
scary. Michael Mayer should have gone higher. Good tight end.
Yes.
They got 2 good players, like 2 good players. Tyree Wilson scares me. We got to get more lined up.
Yeah. And I gotta also give some props to the Green Bay Packers in getting Luke Musgrave for themselves, and I think they even doubled up on tight end, if I'm not mistaken.
Tucker Kraft, yeah.
And so they got
Lucas Van Ness with that 13th pick, which
solid.
So
yeah, it's I think they really did well. Detroit was certainly mentioned. I think the thing. What's up, Jordan? Thanks for hopping in, man. You just missed our discussion about Jerry Jeudy and your boy, so you're a little bit late to the party. So yes, Bawana Beast, I guess you could say to Jordan's point, he was a little bit late to the party. But yeah, Detroit. The one thing, and we touched on it a little bit with the Drew Sanders stuff, Brandon. It was just it was a good draft, but I also thought it was a little bit funny in a sense. Yeah, Detroit.
Yeah.
So they went
Jahmyr
out.
Gibbs at 12 blew my mind.
Yeah, they took Jahmyr Gibbs, and there was rumblings that they might have taken him at 6 above Bijan.
That's insane.
So Detroit did well, but I thought it was funny that they went out and got Jack Campbell, who I did like, and it wasn't anything against Jack Campbell, really, but like those are those types of players that, you probably could have gotten in the Drew Sanders, side of things, like a little bit later, and
Jack Campbell at 18, Drew Sanders at 83.
Yeah, it's called value. It goes back to the value discussion. But the funniest thing to me, I was gonna say though, you trade T.J. Hawkinson, right, Brandon? You trade T.J. Hawkinson to the Minnesota Vikings, who happened to be in the division.
He's a Viking. He looks like a Viking.
But by the way, what school did he go to, Brandon?
Just shut up.
He went to Iowa. And so what do? They go out and take Sam Laporta over Michael Mayer and and some of those other tight ends. I
forgot Sam Laporta went to Iowa. I thought you were just
yeah. And so they go out and
that was weird. Yeah. Well, then they still got Brian Branch in the second round, which should not have happened. And Hendon Hooker. Guy. Like they had a weird but good draft.
Yeah, so like it was a good draft, but like it's
like that gif of that woman that's like drinking the soda and she's like, "Do I like it? No, yeah,
maybe,
no,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah." Or what was the basketball gif where it's the basketball? Maybe it's Alonzo Mourning, or something. But it's the one where he's on the bench and he goes,
"Oh yeah,
yeah." Another team that I thought, oh shoot, who was it? Buffalo. I thought Buffalo once again did quite well, and I also think that Cincinnati did well. I thought Cincinnati did well. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see where he went, Brandon. But obviously Buffalo went out and got Dalton Kincaid to go out with Dawson Knox in that tight end room. But Cincinnati, with some of their picks, they also went out and drafted Chase Brown. So you put Chase Brown with a Joe Mixon. I mean, there's your Samaje Perine replacement right there. And
Joe
so,
Mixon might be.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. That's a good question, Clayton. Jordan Love, he's just such an unknown to me. Like, he still has done almost nothing, and he was drafted in the first round in 2020. Like, I legitimately have absolutely no idea how he's going to play.
Well, and
clearly they like him, or they believe in him at least somewhat. He's also still, well, I say still. I mean, he's 24, and he's kind of a rookie. He's not a rookie, but he's kind of.
Yeah.
And they just extended him too.
I think that's like the weird thing about it all too. I think that's the weird thing about it all too, is because like they extended him, but also by that same token
for a year.
But by the same token, it's like they extended him for one, the market value of the way starter value goes, and two, like, so like it makes sense from the starting quarterback perspective, but like he's just so unproven that it's just like, I mean, you almost gave him, so his 1 year $22 million, which is just $8 million less, I'd say, than what Geno Smith got down with the Seattle Seahawks, which is even more crazy to think about. But I mean, so it's just a little interesting that they decided to.
I feel like they could have extended him for like a couple more years and spent less money. Like, extend it out a little bit, move the money out over the course of all the contract, pay him a little bit less per year, and save some money, and also give yourself like a little bit of a buffer. Because the nice thing about obviously having rookie contract, especially with a first rounder, like they could with the 5th-year option, is you have some time. If he turns out to be the guy, you can build around him. He's not going to break your bank. You're not going to have to pay him huge bucks, and you have some years that you can utilize. With Jordan Love, again, he's still basically a rookie. He's done very little, if not nothing. You just extend him for another year, only 1 year, so he's under contract for the next 2 years. But what do you do? Yeah. If he's good, and if you believe in him, you put him out there, you give him the chance, you give him the full chance, and he wins it, and he's good, and he's the guy. Now you only have the guy for 2 years. You have to pay him again. You're going to pay him way more. On the other hand, like, if you pay him that now and he goes out and he does okay and he shows something, he doesn't light the world on fire, which I don't think he's going to do, because again, he's done very little, then you're stuck. Like, is he good? Is he not good? Are you going to pay him? Are you going to draft a quarterback with your next pick?
Which they did.
What is the next pick? Well, they did. Are you going to draft a quarterback? Are you going to keep drafting quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Are you going to just keep looking? Like, what do you do?
But the Green Bay Packers did do a pretty decent draft, though, because they drafted Carl Brooks in round 6. Dontavian Wicks was the guy that you had mentioned. They drafted Dontavian Wicks. Jaden Reed, another wide receiver that I was really high on. They went out and got Jaden Reed. The quarterback from Penn State, who actually started over Will Levis. It's probably because Penn State saw him put mayonnaise in his coffee and was like, okay, we're done. You go put yourself in the transfer portal.
I bet he dipped the banana peel in it.
Yeah.
Full banana peel.
Yeah. But they went out and took Sean Clifford, and then they go and get Kobe Wooden from Auburn, and then Tucker Kraft, obviously, that we mentioned earlier, Jaden Reed, and Luke Musgrave and Lucas Van Ness. So, I mean, they really didn't do that bad. But it's the puzzling thing, for sure.
Go ahead.
Well, if we're going to talk about the Packers, if that's what you were going with.
That's not what I was going to say.
But I was going to say, like, the Jets was a team that in some of their, like, few picks did pretty well. The fact that they were able to get Joe Tippmann when they did, and the value of when they got Joe Tippmann was really solid for them. So
Yeah,
I
Joe
thought,
Tedman. They also got Will McDonald as well, who's
Yeah.
freaky edge rusher. So pretty decent. You know who didn't do super hot, and I'm kind of happy about it, is Kansas City. Although I will say, I hate that they got Felix. They always seem to get the guy that they get someone that I really like, and I hate that he's Chief because I can never root for him again. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But they got that guy in Phoenix, NDK, who I had mocked kind of actually in that area. Except they put him at 30, and then they got Rashee Rice, who's a good wide receiver.
But after that, yeah.
And
but
again,
after that,
I hate that he's a Chief. But then after that, it's kind of just like, who?
Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was kind of nice to see, some of those teams that you really don't think as far as having those good draft, meaning Detroit and Houston, and seeing the kind of draft that they certainly had. I thought it was really nice. And so I think all in all, it was a fun draft, and it was certainly nice all in all, like not having that first round pick, because you could just truly like sit back and enjoy the first round and just truly see what's going to transpire, and just see all the hypes and the drama and the emotion and so on and so forth. So to tie a bow certainly around this, Brandon, in terms of the Broncos draft class. And by the way, to all of you now new commentators, should I say, for watching of the Manely Broncos podcast right now in the stream, what did you guys feel about the Broncos draft? If you were to grade it off of right now, because obviously Brandon mentioned it earlier, we've not seen them take a snap yet, but if we were to grade right now, how would you guys go out and grade it? So, Brandon, what did you feel like if you were to grade the Broncos draft? How would you grade it?
For only having 5 picks and starting basically at the 3rd round, I'd probably give them an A-. Yeah,
I feel like I feel like the B plus,
no one knows.
A- is like that decent range where
Part of the thing that went into my grade, although I know I also just talked about having factors into a grade that mean nothing. Part of the factor of my grade was that we did so much with only 5 picks.
Yeah. I also think that it's one of those things, like it depends on how you grade it. So like I like the Riley Moss selection, right? Like we talked about it. The selection with Riley Moss, it isn't so much the Riley Moss selection. It's just the process of how it got there, with the trade up, and, is it a little bit high? So, but I mean, yeah, so it's one of those cases where, that's kind of the value where you go strictly to necessarily those kinds of areas as far as bringing down the draft grade, but then you kind of like look at it from the standpoint of, well, they were able to really luck out in getting players like J.L. Skinner and Alex Forsyth near the end of the draft. So I said B plus, but I wouldn't be afraid to kind of give it an A-. But like between those two grades, A- and a B plus, those two grades I feel like are definitely some solid grades. And maybe the A- is a little bit optimistic. But I mean, again, when you truly only have 5 selections,
well, the other thing that went into that is you got some ridiculous value.
Yeah, and I really like how you put it, because and anybody that didn't get a chance to catch it, I'll actually have you say it in the way that you phrased it, Brandon, because it's truly the best way to explain it when you are talking about, if you were to swap JL or Alex Forsyth with a certain other player.
If you're looking at where they picked people and who they picked as, I'm not sure how to explain it the way I'm trying to explain it here. Basically, what you do is you look at everyone that they picked, and if there's anything that you're like, you have a little bit of a a reservation about, like maybe you don't like the Riley Moss pick at 83, one thing you can do is kind of look at the rest of the board. And obviously they had no way of knowing this was going to happen when they picked Riley Moss. Obviously they're not psychic. But if you look at Riley Moss at 83 and you look at JL Skinner at 183, literally exactly 100 picks later, and you just swap the two. If we took JL Skinner at 83 and Riley Moss at 183, I'd be elated. I would love it. I'd be over the moon. It'd be an amazing 2 picks because you get JL Skinner where he probably should have gone, and you get Riley Moss where some people think he should have gone. So yes, you still got both those players and you got them in the opposite positions, but just flip it. Like if you each took JL Skinner at 83, everyone would be like, oh my God, that's an amazing pick. If we took Riley Moss at 183, people would probably be like, you know what? That's a good value. Round 6, pick 183, possible starting corner, good value. Same thing with, even if you take Alex Forsyth at pick 183, probably still a good pick. You take him at 257. So that's what you got to do.
100%. Well,
or
gentlemen,
if you can even go Drew Sanders, you take him in round 2 at 63. You take Marvin Mims round 367. I mean, they're literally 4 spots ahead, like apart from each other. But it's people probably wouldn't hate it as much. It's weird. It's the exact same players, but it's just you swap them and suddenly they're better.
That's right. Well, hey, guys, we want to say thank you so much for hopping on with us. We'll dive a little. We mentioned on the top that we'll try and get into the undrafted pool. We'll talk about that on the next episode of Manely, plus some other news and stuff like that. You know, for maybe the NFL and some Broncos related stuff. So we'll talk about that on the next episode of the Manely Broncos. But we are so thankful to all the people that were commenting on the show tonight for Manely Broncos. So thank you guys so much. MVP. You are the real MVP. Make sure you guys follow the Manely Broncos Twitter handle as well at Manely Broncos. Follow Brandon, myself. The Twitter handles are on the stream, as you can see. Cameron Parker PO, Brandon Miller PO. We do go live every Wednesday at 7:30 on the MHRT network. Also, make sure you tune in to the other shows, Sports Nonsense and Whiskey, which airs at 7:30 on Tuesdays. The 5280 podcast that airs at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays. The Wild Wild West show, which is a divisional outlook from the Kansas City Chiefs perspective, Chargers perspective, Raiders perspective, and of course Broncos perspective, that airs at 5:30 on and I'm saying this from the Mountain Time perspective on the MHRT network, and then of course us at 7:30. The BPA Show, which is with Patrick Chiotti and Marcus Boggs. Boggs, of course, is a former member of the Manely Broncos podcast, and they do a show called the BPA Show. And of course, with the draft concluding, I'm sure they have a absolutely fire show for you guys tomorrow. So make sure you guys tune into that. So, and of course, Bronco Breakdown is going to be on Friday. So tune into that. Again, thank you guys so much for hopping in and chiming in. It's always a blast to not just get an opportunity to talk football with Brandon, but I mean, it gets boring every time. Sometimes, when you talk football with Brandon, so it's always nice to kind of. So it's nice to have some
I don't
other
like
fresh.
Your ass either.
So it's nice to have some fresher ideas as well in the comments.
I want out of the elevator. Okay.
Right.
I love you guys. Thanks for watching.
No, yes, but anyway, thank you guys so much, and see you guys next time on another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.